My sister sold our late dad's house behind my back. I let her believe she pulled it off. A week later, the new owners showed up and gave me the keys. She called me screaming. There are some betrayals that cut so deep, they change you forever. For me, it wasn't just my sister trying to steal my inheritance. It was her locking me out of our childhood home, stripping it bare, and trying to erase every memory of our dad. And that's when I knew this battle I had to fight. So, for context, my name's Matt. I'm 32. And honestly, I've always been the quiet one in the family. Not shy, exactly, just the guy who'd rather pick his battles and keep the peace. My sister, Claire, on the other hand? She's 35, loud, bossy, the kind of person who walks into a room and makes sure everyone knows she's in charge. Growing up, she'd take my toys, my Halloween candy, even my spot on the couch, and somehow, I'd be the one punished if I dared to complain. The only real balance we had was our dad. He wasn't perfect, but he was fair. He'd split chores evenly, he'd step in when Claire pushed too far, and he always told me quietly, "You don't have to fight every battle, son. Just the ones that matter." That advice stuck with me. But when he passed away last year, that balance was gone. And everything in our family started tilting toward absolute chaos. Dad's house was our childhood home. It was nothing fancy. A 2-story brick house with creaky floors and a huge oak tree out front. It always smelled like coffee and motor oil, because Dad loved tinkering with his old pickup in the garage. When he passed, he left the house to both of us. The will was crystal clear, a 50-50 split, no selling unless we both agreed. Of course, Claire immediately insisted she was too busy to deal with it and said I should just handle everything. So I did. I mowed the lawn, paid for small repairs, even drove over after work last winter to make sure the pipes didn't freeze. At first, I thought we were on the same page. We'd text occasionally about what to do with the place, and she seemed content to let me keep it up until we decided. But then, little things started to feel off. Claire stopped answering my calls when I wanted to talk about repairs. When I sent her receipts for expenses I'd covered, she'd take weeks to pay me back, or just ignore them completely until I reminded her. Then came the first real red flag. I drove over one Saturday morning to change the furnace filter and noticed a "for sale" sign leaning against the side of the garage. It wasn't planted in the yard, mind you, just lying there, like it was waiting for the right moment. My stomach dropped. I texted Claire, "Hey, what's with the sign?" She didn't reply for hours. When she finally did, her response was short and dismissive. "Oh, I was just getting a quote from a realtor." Chill. Chill. That word burned more than I expected. This wasn't just a casual quote. She'd never once mentioned wanting to sell. And the fact that she did this behind my back, hiding it? I could almost hear Dad's voice, quiet but firm, saying, "This might be one of those battles that matter." I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. But a few days later, I got a letter in the mail addressed to homeowner. It was from a title company confirming the pending sale of the property. I read it 3 times, just standing there in my kitchen, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I called Claire. She picked up on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "What now? Why did I just get a letter about a pending sale?" I asked, my voice tight. There was a pause. Just long enough to tell me she hadn't expected me to find out yet. Then she sighed dramatically. "Matt, don't make this a big deal. I found a buyer. We need to sell anyway. I'm just getting it done. We, Claire? We're co-owners. You can't just sell it without me agreeing." Her tone turned sharp. "You've been playing house there like it's yours alone. I have just as much right to sell as you do." I could feel my jaw tightening. "That's not how it works. You need my signature." Another pause. And then she laughed. This short, mean little laugh. "Matt, you really think you're the smart one, huh? Just let me handle this. You'll get your share." I hung up without saying another word. My hands were cold, my chest buzzing with a quiet, seething anger. She had actually gone through with it. Tried to sell the house without me. And judging by that letter, she'd gotten pretty far. That night, I sat in Dad's old recliner in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall, him holding baby Claire, me on my first bike, all those birthdays and Christmas mornings. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to do something. And that's when I made a quiet decision. I wasn't going to yell at Claire. I wasn't going to beg her to stop. No, I was going to let her think she'd won. Because if there was one thing Dad taught me, it's that some battles are worth fighting and some are worth planning. For the next couple of weeks, I stayed quiet. Not passive, not checked out, just quiet. I still went to the house every few days to check on things, but I stopped texting Claire updates. If she wanted to play sneaky, fine. I'd let her think I was too naive to notice. Then came the group text. Out of nowhere, Claire blasted me with a message that included our mom, a couple of cousins, and even her best friend from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The message read, "House sold. Party popper drinks tonight to celebrate." My phone buzzed 5 more times in a row as her friends spammed her with clapping emojis and "Yas Queen" messages. Mom chimed in too, finally. This will be so much easier for everyone. I just stared at the screen, heat creeping up my neck. Easier for who? For Claire, who hadn't lifted a finger to take care of the house. For Mom, who had stopped visiting the place years ago because it smelled like dust. It was like I didn't exist, like they'd already spent the money and written me out of the story. I didn't reply to the thread. 10 minutes later, Claire texted me privately. "You're coming tonight, right?" "It's done, Matt. Don't be petty." Petty? The word made me laugh. Not the funny kind, but the sharp, bitter kind that sits heavy in your chest. I didn't reply to her either. Instead, I drove to the house after work and sat in the driveway for a while, watching the sun set over the oak tree. I imagined Dad sitting on the porch swing like he used to, sipping a beer, watching me wrestle with the lawnmower. "Don't let her push you around, kid." I could almost hear him saying it. The next day, I got an email from a lawyer I'd never heard of. "Per your sister's request, please sign and return the enclosed documents to finalize the sale." She'd actually hired someone. Forged ahead like I was just a formality to check off. I scrolled through the documents, my stomach twisting. My name was already typed out on the signature lines, waiting for me to sign. She'd even included wire instructions for where the money would go, half to her account, half to mine. It felt clinical, impersonal, like my entire childhood had been reduced to a dollar figure. I didn't sign. Instead, I sent back a single-line email. "I do not consent to this sale." The next morning, Claire called me. No hello. Just straight into yelling. "Matt, what is your problem? Do you want to keep living in that dump forever? This is good money. Do you know how rare it is to get a cash offer like this?" "I never said I wanted to sell," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "You don't get to just sit on it forever," she snapped. "Mom agrees with me. You're being selfish." There it was. Mom. I should have seen it coming. Claire always knew how to get Mom on her side. I could picture them sitting together at Mom's kitchen table, talking about me like I was some stubborn little kid who needed to be handled. Sure enough, Mom called me later that day. "Honey, your sister is just trying to do what's best," she said, her voice soft but firm, that tone she used when she wanted me to cave without making a scene. "You've been holding on to that house long enough. Your father wouldn't want it sitting empty." I closed my eyes, fighting back the urge to say something I'd regret. "Dad wouldn't want it sold behind my back either." Mom went quiet, then sighed. "Sometimes you need to be practical, Matt. You're single. You don't even live there. Why cling to it?" That one stung more than I expected. Being single wasn't a crime, and it didn't make my connection to the house any less real. But Mom had always had this way of framing things that made me feel like I was just less. I hung up without agreeing to anything. After that, the pressure campaign went into overdrive. Claire started posting on social media about finally being free of the burden and ready for the next chapter. She even uploaded a photo of the house with a caption about how she was grateful to let go of the past. People commented things like, "So proud of you, and you deserve this," as if she had single-handedly carried the weight of the place all this time. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I quietly called the title company listed in the letter and asked a few questions. I learned that the closing date was set for the following Friday, just over a week away. I also learned that, technically, the sale couldn't go through without my signature. The representative sounded apologetic as she explained that Claire had been very eager to wrap things up. Eager, that was one word for it. The following weekend, I went to the house again. This time, I walked through every single room, taking my time. The faded wallpaper in the dining room, the scratch marks on the kitchen door frame where Dad had measured our heights every year, the tiny oil stain on the garage floor where he dropped a wrench and cursed under his breath. I took photos of everything. Not for Instagram, not for proof, just for me, to remind myself why this mattered. And as I stood in the living room, the late afternoon light spilling across Dad's old recliner, I made a decision. I was going to let Claire think she had me cornered. Let her gloat. Let her believe she'd pulled this off. Because if she wanted to fight over this house, she had no idea just how patient I could be. The next week was quiet. Unnervingly quiet. Claire stopped texting. Mom didn't call. Even the group chat went silent. It should have been a relief, but it felt like the air before a thunderstorm, heavy and still. I knew better than to think Claire had given up. No, this was her regrouping, plotting her next move. I found out what that move was on a Wednesday afternoon. I drove to Dad's house after work like I usually did. And as I pulled into the driveway, something immediately felt wrong. The curtains were gone. Not just open, gone. The living room windows were bare, the rods empty, little screw holes visible like tiny open wounds. I got out of the car and unlocked the front door. Or at least I tried to. The key didn't work. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired, fumbling it. But after the third attempt, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The lock had been changed. I stood there on the porch, gripping the doorknob until my knuckles turned white, my heart hammering. My own father's house, the place I'd spent months maintaining while Claire was too busy, the place I had every legal right to enter, and I was locked out. I pulled out my phone and called Claire. She didn't answer. I called again. This time, she picked up but didn't even say hello. "Yeah, you changed the locks," I said, trying to keep my voice level. She didn't deny it. "Matt, you weren't listening. I had to get the house ready for the new owners. They needed access." My chest tightened. "You don't have the right to do that." Her tone was maddeningly casual, like we were discussing the weather. "Technically, Matt, you weren't using it. And we can't risk you messing up the deal at the last minute. The buyers are solid. They want to close this Friday. Don't ruin this for everyone." Everyone. She kept saying that as if everyone was just her and Mom. "You changed the locks on Dad's house," I said slowly, letting the words hang there. Claire sighed like I was the difficult one. "Don't be so dramatic. You'll get your share of the money. You should be thanking me. I got us a great price." That was the moment something in me snapped. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about respect, or the complete lack of it. She hadn't just locked me out of a building. She'd locked me out of my own history, my memories, my connection to the one place that still felt like Dad was around. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at the front door, my hands shaking. Then I walked around the house, peering through the windows. It was worse than I thought. The dining room table? Gone. The bookshelf Dad built? Gone. Even the recliner, the one thing I'd begged Claire to leave until we decided what to do with the house? Gone. The rooms looked hollow, stripped of their soul. I pressed my forehead to the glass, trying to steady my breathing. She hadn't just changed the locks. She'd emptied the house. I called Mom, hoping for some kind of sanity check, some acknowledgement that this had gone too far. "Oh, Claire told me she was going to start clearing things out," Mom said breezily, as if this was a spring cleaning project. "It needed to be done. You never got around to it." "They were Dad's things," I said, my voice tight. "They were just things, Matt," she replied. "Don't get sentimental now. This is progress." Progress? That word landed like a slap. I could feel my throat tightening, that mix of anger and grief that makes you feel like you're about to either shout or break down. "I hope you at least saved some of it," I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Too long of a pause. "Claire put most of it in storage," Mom said finally. "Most?" Another pause. "Some of it wasn't worth keeping." I pictured the garage, Dad's tools, the photo albums stacked on the shelves, the little wooden box where he kept spare bolts and screws. I pictured Claire standing there with a contractor bag, deciding what was worth keeping. I hung up without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the empty rooms every time I closed my eyes. The house had been alive, full of Dad's presence, and now it was hollow. All because Claire wanted to cash out. Around 2 a.m., I got a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Matt. This is Sarah from Golden Realty. Just confirming that we'll see you Friday for the closing." Closing. Claire had given them my number, probably hoping they'd pressure me into showing up. I stared at the message for a long time, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then, instead of replying, I put the phone down and sat in the dark, thinking. And somewhere between 2 a.m. and sunrise, the anger sharpened into something else. Resolve. Claire had crossed the line. She'd shut me out, stripped the house, tried to erase me from the process entirely, and she thought she'd won. Fine. Let her think that. Because if she wanted a war, I was finally ready to give her one. But I wasn't going to scream or threaten or beg. No, I was going to be patient. I was going to be smart. And when I made my move, it was going to hurt. The next few days felt like wading through molasses. I'd wake up, go to work, go through the motions, come home, and just sit in my apartment staring at nothing. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from Claire I didn't read. Calls from Mom I ignored. Even emails from the realtor trying to reassure me about the closing. It all felt so surreal, like I was standing still while everyone else was bulldozing ahead with a life I hadn't agreed to. On Thursday, the night before the closing, I finally opened one of Claire's texts. "You're being ridiculous. Just sign. We'll be done with this tomorrow." Attached was a photo. She was standing in what used to be Dad's garage, smiling triumphantly, holding up a set of shiny new keys like she just bought a car. Behind her, I could see boxes stacked neatly along the wall and a big empty space where Dad's workbench used to be. I sat there staring at the photo until my eyes burned. She wasn't just indifferent to how I felt. She was proud of what she'd done. Proud enough to document it like some victory lap. That night, I drove to the house one last time. I parked across the street and just sat there in the dark, staring at the windows. They looked empty, lifeless, like a stage set after the play was over. It was raining lightly, little streaks sliding down the windshield. And for a moment, I thought about just driving away for good. Let her have it. Let her cash out. Let the house go to strangers. Was it worth the fight? Was I just clinging to the past because I was too scared to let go? I thought about Dad then, about the last real conversation we'd had in that living room a couple months before he died. He'd been tired, sitting in his recliner, but his eyes were bright as he talked about how he hoped the house would stay in the family. "This place has seen everything," he said, glancing around the room. "Christmas mornings, birthday parties, broken windows, bad haircuts. It's more than just wood and nails, Matt. It's the history. I want you and your sister to have that, not just the money from selling it." The memory made my chest ache. But as much as I wanted to honor what Dad said, I couldn't ignore the gnawing thought that maybe I was losing more than just a house here. Maybe I was losing my family too. Whatever fragile thread we still had left. When I got back to my apartment, I saw that Mom had left a voicemail. I didn't want to listen, but curiosity got the better of me. "Matt, honey." Her voice came through, soft but with that edge of irritation. "I don't know why you're being so stubborn. Claire is doing all the work and you're making this so hard for her. You need to stop living in the past and move on. We're all moving on. Don't be the one holding us back. Holding them back." It was such a mom thing to say, to make me feel like the villain for not rolling over and doing what was easiest for everyone else. I deleted the voicemail and sat there in silence for a long time. That was my lowest point. It wasn't just the house or Claire or even Mom. It was the realization that no one in my family seemed to see me as anything but an obstacle. Not a son, not a brother, not someone who had spent months driving out there after work, making sure the pipes didn't freeze, replacing filters, mowing the lawn. Just an inconvenience they needed to manage so they could get their payout. For a while, I seriously considered giving up. Sign the papers, take the money, wash my hands of it. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe that would stop the constant tension humming in my chest. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the silence of the apartment. Maybe it was the photo of Claire holding those keys, grinning like she'd won. Maybe it was the memory of Dad's voice in that living room, steady and calm. Whatever it was, I realized that if I gave in now, it wouldn't actually make things easier. It would just teach them that they could do this to me whenever they wanted, that my voice didn't matter, that I didn't matter. So, I started to plan. The first step was information. The next morning, instead of going to work, I took a personal day and drove to the county recorder's office. The clerk was helpful, if a little confused, about why I wanted copies of everything related to the house. She printed out the deed, the probate paperwork from when Dad passed, and even the pending sale documents Claire had submitted. I sat there in the little records room, flipping through the papers, my heart pounding. Claire hadn't just been reckless. She'd actually tried to file for a quitclaim deed with only her signature, like she owned the house outright. It hadn't gone through because the county flagged it as incomplete, but it was there in black and white. Fraud. I took photos of everything and asked for certified copies, just in case. Then I called the lawyer. I didn't hire him, not yet, but I wanted to know my options. He was calm, professional, and after I explained the situation, he said something that made my pulse slow down for the first time in days. "You have more power here than you think," he told me. "Without your consent, the sale can't go through. And if your sister changed the locks and removed property without your permission, that could be considered unlawful. Document everything. Stay calm and don't sign a thing. Stay calm." It became my mantra over the next few days. I still didn't talk to Claire or Mom. I didn't respond to the realtor. I just kept collecting information, receipts from the repairs I'd paid for, photos of the emptied rooms, screenshots of Claire's posts bragging about the sale. And slowly, the anger that had been boiling in my chest started to feel less like a wildfire and more like a sharpened blade. Controlled. Focused. I wasn't just going to stop this sale. I was going to make sure Claire regretted ever thinking she could shut me out. The next morning felt different. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without that heavy pit in my stomach. The anger was still there, yes, but it wasn't wild anymore. It was steady, purposeful. I spent the early hours organizing everything I'd gathered so far. Copies of the deed, probate documents, screenshots of texts and social media posts, receipts from the months I'd spent maintaining the house. I put them in a binder with labeled tabs. It sounds boring, but as I flipped through the pages, I felt something I hadn't felt in a while: control. And control, I realized, was power. That afternoon, I went back to the house. Not to mope, not to sit in the driveway like some lovesick teenager, but to document. I took photos of the new locks, of the empty rooms, of the garage with the missing workbench. I even went to the side yard and photographed the pile of old furniture Claire had left for bulk pickup, just in case something of sentimental or monetary value had been tossed. While I was crouched near the garage, a neighbor came out, Mrs. Reynolds, who had lived next door since before I was born. She gave me a sad smile and said, "I was wondering when I'd see you, Matt. Been too long." We chatted for a bit, and then she casually dropped something that made my blood run cold. "That sister of yours sure has been busy. I saw a moving truck here last weekend. They were loading up all your daddy's things, and some people I didn't recognize have been coming by with clipboards measuring the rooms." "Clipboards?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Realtors, I think. Or maybe the buyers. They seemed real friendly with Claire. She said you were fine with it all, that you'd already moved on." I thanked Mrs. Reynolds, but my jaw was tight as I got back in the car. Fine with it all. That was the story Claire was spinning now. That I was the agreeable little brother, happy to let her handle everything. Good. Let her think that. Because what she didn't know was that while she was busy telling the world I was compliant, I was quietly building the strongest case of my life. The shift really started that weekend. I made an appointment with the lawyer I'd spoken to on the phone and brought him my binder. He went through everything carefully, occasionally nodding or making notes. "You've been very thorough," he said finally. "That's going to work in your favor." He explained my rights again, slowly, clearly, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting for my back foot. I wasn't just reacting to what Claire was doing. I was actively preparing. We discussed options, sending a formal cease and desist letter to Claire, notifying the title company of my non-consent in writing, even pursuing a partition action if she refused to cooperate. "What's a partition action?" I asked. It's a legal process where the court forces the sale or division of jointly owned property, he explained. But it takes time and it's public record. Your sister probably doesn't want this getting messy in court. She's trying to rush this through quietly. If we push back hard enough, she might back down. That stuck with me. The idea that Claire didn't want this to get messy. She wanted to win cleanly, to be the hero of her own story. Well, I was about to change the narrative. Over the next week, I stopped hiding. I drove to the house in broad daylight, parked in the driveway, and took my time inspecting the place. Claire wasn't there. She hadn't been since the locks were changed, but I knew she'd hear about it. Small-town gossip travels fast. Sure enough, 2 days later, she sent me a text. "Why were you at the house today?" I didn't answer. 5 minutes later. "The closing is tomorrow. Don't do anything stupid." Instead of replying, I sent an email to the title company, attaching a copy of the deed and a signed statement of non-consent. The paralegal wrote back within an hour. "Thank you for clarifying. Please note that we cannot proceed with the closing without your signature." Just like that, the deal was stalled. I didn't tell Claire right away. Instead, I went about my day as if nothing had happened. I met a friend for coffee. I went to the gym for the first time in months. I even cooked myself a decent dinner that night. It felt good, better than good. It felt like breathing fresh air after weeks of choking. The following morning, my phone exploded. Claire called first, then texted, "What did you just do?" I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, the closing fell through. "The buyers are threatening to walk. You're ruining this." I set the phone down and let it buzz. Mom called next, her voice frantic when I finally picked up. "Matthew, why are you doing this? Your sister worked so hard." "She changed the locks on me, Mom," I said evenly. "She emptied the house without asking. She tried to file a quick claim deed with only her signature. I'm not the one ruining this." Mom was quiet for a long time, then said, "You could have at least warned us." I almost laughed. Warn them? I'd been warning them for months in every polite, measured way I could, and no one had listened. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not until we sit down and talk like adults." Mom huffed. "Your father wouldn't want this fighting." "My father wouldn't want to be erased," I said, and hung up. Something shifted after that. I wasn't hiding anymore. Not emotionally, not physically. I started going to the house regularly again, even if it was just to sit in the yard or walk the perimeter. I'd bring a notebook and jot down ideas, lists of what repairs I'd still like to make, plans for how I might use the house if I got to keep my share. One Saturday morning, I met with a contractor to get an estimate for restoring the hardwood floors. It wasn't a commitment, just an idea, but it felt symbolic, like I was reclaiming the place piece by piece. I also started looking into short-term rental opportunities. It turned out the house was in a prime location for weekend getaways. If I invested in some updates, I could rent it out and make enough to cover property taxes and maintenance easily. The more I learned, the stronger I felt. This wasn't just about stopping Claire anymore. This was about making sure Dad's house lived on, that it stayed in the family, but on my terms. By the end of the month, Claire had gone from furious to desperate. Her texts started sounding less angry and more panicked. "You're going to make me lose this deal. Do you know how much time and money I've put into this? You're making me look bad." And then finally, just 3 words, "Fine, let's talk." Those words hit like a victory bell, because now, for the first time, Claire wasn't dictating the terms. I was. Claire's 3-word text, "Fine, let's talk," sat on my phone screen for a long time before I replied. "When and where?" I typed back. She answered almost immediately. "Mom's place. Sunday noon." Of course, she chose Mom's house. Neutral ground in theory, but really home turf for her, somewhere she knew she'd have backup. Fine. I was ready for that. I spent Saturday preparing. I went through my binder again, adding new documents, the certified deed copies, the statement of non-consent from the title company, the receipts for every lawn mowing, repair, and winterization I'd paid for out of pocket. I even printed screenshots of her celebratory posts and the text where she admitted to changing the locks. Then I did something I hadn't done since Dad's funeral. I took out his old leather briefcase from the closet. It still smelled faintly of sawdust and tobacco. He used to carry it everywhere when I was a kid, full of invoices and receipts for his contracting jobs. I put my binder inside and snapped it shut. It felt symbolic. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully. Not a suit, that would feel too much like a performance, but nice. A clean button-down, pressed pants, polished shoes. If Claire wanted to paint me as the irresponsible brother who couldn't let go, I wasn't going to give her any ammunition. When I arrived at Mom's, Claire's car was already in the driveway. I sat in mine for a minute, breathing deeply, grounding myself. Stay calm, I reminded myself. Calm wins. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Matt, she said, her tone clipped. We need to settle this. Inside, Claire was sitting at the dining room table, arms crossed, jaw set. There were papers spread out in front of her, closing documents from the look of it. And for a moment, I had to swallow the anger rising in my throat. I took a seat across from her and set Dad's briefcase on the table. Let's talk, I said. For a second, I saw something flicker across Claire's face. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance that I was matching her calm instead of coming in hot. She launched right in. The buyers are getting impatient. If we don't close soon, they'll walk and we'll lose the deal. I've already put down money on a new place, Matt. I need this to go through. You put money down before the sale was final? I asked, eyebrows raised. She flushed slightly, but didn't answer the question. Look, you're getting half. That's more than fair. You don't even live there. You're just being stubborn. I opened the briefcase and slid the binder toward her. You might want to read this before calling me stubborn. She glanced at it, unimpressed. But as she started flipping through the pages, her expression changed. The certified deed copy, the lawyer's note confirming that I had to consent to any sale. The receipts, dozens of them, showing how much money I'd put into maintaining the house. What is this supposed to prove? She asked finally, but her voice was tighter now. That I'm not some passive bystander you can bulldoze, I said evenly. You tried to file a quick claim deed with just your signature. That's fraud, Claire. Her face went pale. It was just a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, I cut in. You changed the locks, cleared out Dad's things, and tried to sell the house behind my back. You told neighbors I was fine with it all. You didn't just make a mistake. You lied to me, to Mom, to everyone. Mom cleared her throat nervously. Matt, honey, maybe we should just know, I said, turning to her. You told me I was holding everyone back, that I needed to move on. But moving on doesn't mean letting my sister erase me. The room was quiet for a long moment. Claire was glaring at me, but there was something new in her eyes. Not just anger, but calculation. For the first time, I could see the wheels turning as she realized she didn't have all the power anymore. Finally, she said, so, what do you want, Matt? Do you want to keep living there forever? Fine, I'll sign it over to you. You can pay the property taxes and the utilities and watch the value drop while I actually do something with my life. Her tone was mocking, but I caught the nervous edge under it. I don't want to fight with you, Claire, I said. I want a fair solution, but that starts with you acknowledging what you did. She rolled her eyes. You want an apology? Is that what this is about? It's about respect, I said simply. For a second, she didn't answer, just sat there fuming. That's when Mom, of all people, spoke up. Claire, she said softly. He's right. Claire turned on her. What? You went too far, Mom said. Changing the locks, selling the furniture. Your father would never have approved. It was the first time Mom had sided with me through this whole ordeal, and I could see it landed like a punch to Claire's gut. Her eyes narrowed. Fine, she said finally, her voice cold. If you want to drag this out, go ahead, but don't expect me to sit around forever. She shoved the binder back toward me and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I sat there for a long time after she left, my heart still pounding. It wasn't victory. Not yet. But it was a shift. For the first time, Claire had been forced to face me, to see that I wasn't backing down. And Mom, whether she realized it or not, had just given me the leverage I needed. Because if this did go public, Claire wouldn't just lose the house sale, she'd lose face. And for someone like her, that was worse than losing money. The next day, I took things a step further. I contacted the title company again, this time formally requesting they flag the property as disputed until further notice. That would make it impossible for Claire to sneak through another attempted sale. Then, just to twist the knife a little, I scheduled a consultation with a property management company. If I decided to keep the house and rent it out, I wanted to know my options. The representative was excited. The location was in demand, and she said I could expect high occupancy rates if I made a few updates. That night, I drafted an email to Claire laying out everything clearly. I was not consenting to the sale. The house was legally co-owned, and she had no authority to act unilaterally. If she attempted another sale without my consent, I would pursue legal action for breach of fiduciary duty and unlawful removal of property. I didn't send it yet, not because I was afraid, but because timing was everything. I wanted her to stew. I wanted her to feel the deal slipping through her fingers. And when I finally sent that email, I wanted it to hit like a hammer. As I closed Dad's briefcase and set it by the door, I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't look like someone being dragged along by his sister anymore. I looked like someone who was ready. A few days passed before I made my move. Claire didn't reach out, which told me two things. One, she was fuming. And two, she was scrambling behind the scenes, trying to salvage the deal. Good. Let her run herself in circles. By Thursday, I decided it was time. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened Dad's briefcase, and pulled out the email draft I'd been sitting on. I read it through one more time. No anger, no insults, just facts. Then I attached scanned copies of the deed, the receipts, and the lawyer's note about co-ownership consent. I CC'd Mom and, most importantly, the title company. Then I hit send. It took less than 10 minutes for my phone to light up. First came Claire's text, "What did you just do?" Then the call from Mom. "Matthew," she said, voice tight. "Claire is saying you ruined everything." I stayed calm. "No, Mom. I protected my rights and Dad's house. She says the buyers backed out." "That's unfortunate," I said, not sounding sorry at all. "But maybe next time she won't try to force a sale without talking to me first." Mom was quiet for a long time. "You're really not going to sign, are you?" "Not until I'm ready," I said. The fallout hit faster than I expected. By Friday, I got a polite but firm email from the buyer's realtor confirming they were terminating their offer due to uncertain title status. Translation: they didn't want to get dragged into a family dispute. Claire must have completely lost it because that night she showed up at my apartment. She didn't knock gently either. It was the kind of pounding that made the neighbors peek through their peepholes. When I opened the door, she stormed past me into the living room. "You just cost me 20 grand, she shouted. I closed the door behind her, calm as ever. "No, Claire, you cost yourself 20 grand when you tried to cut me out." Her face was red. "Do you think you won? You're just delaying the inevitable. You can't sit on that house forever." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Maybe not, but I can sit on it long enough for you to lose every buyer who doesn't want to deal with a contested property." That shut her up for a moment. "You're being spiteful," she said finally. "No," I said, "I'm being fair. You had every chance to work with me, and instead you lied, changed the locks, and cleared out Dad's things. If you want to sell, we're going to do it on my terms, not yours." I let that hang in the air. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "We're going to hire a neutral appraiser. We're going to split any profit fairly after deducting the money I spent maintaining the place. And if you ever try to sell without my consent again, I will take you to court. And trust me, I have the documentation to win." Her jaw clenched. "You think you're so smart," she muttered. "No," I said, standing up straight. "I just think Dad deserved better than to have his legacy pawned off like a used car." She didn't have a comeback for that. She just glared at me for a few seconds, then stormed out, slamming the door behind her. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I drove out to the house with a locksmith I'd hired. Using my certified copy of the deed as proof of ownership, I had the locks rekeyed legally, since I was a co-owner. Then I changed the alarm code, called the utilities, and had all bills redirected to my name. By the time I was done, the house was mine again. Not just legally, but practically. I stood in the empty living room and looked around. The space was still hollow, stripped of most of its soul, but it didn't feel lost anymore. It felt reclaimable. I brought in a few pieces of furniture from my apartment, just a couch, a lamp, a rug, to make it feel lived in again. Then I hung one of Dad's old photos, the one of him leaning against his truck with a proud grin. It was symbolic more than anything, a message to myself and to Claire when she inevitably came by. This house was no longer just a bargaining chip. It was mine to protect. A few days later, I got an email from the property management company I'd met with earlier. "We'd love to work with you," the manager wrote. "This property could bring an excellent revenue as a vacation rental. Let us know if you'd like to move forward." I smiled as I read it. Not only had I stopped the sale, but I'd turned the house from a financial burden into a potential asset, something that could generate income for years. And the best part? Claire had no say in it, unless she wanted to contribute. That weekend, I posted a single photo on my private social media. It was just the house, taken at sunset with the caption, "Finally home." Within an hour, Claire texted me, "You're such a child." I didn't reply, because at that point, I didn't need to. She knew she'd lost control, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. But there was one last piece to put in place. The next time Claire tried to bring up selling the house, I planned to be ready with a formal proposal, one that benefited me no matter what she chose. If she agreed, I'd buy out her share at a fair price, using the rental income to fund it over time. If she refused, I'd simply keep the house running as a rental and let the profits pile up month after month while she got nothing but a tax bill every year until she finally caved. Either way, I'd win. It didn't take long for the ripple effects to start. 2 weeks after I rekeyed the house, Claire sent me a long, rambling email. The subject line just said, "You win." The body was classic Claire, half accusation, half martyr act. "You've made this whole process impossible. The buyers are gone. The realtor is done with us. And now I'm out the inspection fee and appraisal costs. I hope you're happy, Matt. You've turned a simple sale into a family feud. Mom can't even invite us both over for dinner without it turning into drama. Congratulations, you ruined everything." I read it twice, then closed my laptop without replying, because she was wrong. I hadn't ruined anything. I'd saved something. And for once, I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative. A few days later, Mom called and asked if I would come over for Sunday dinner. "I think it's time we all sat down together," she said gently. I hesitated, but something in her voice told me she meant it. This wasn't another ambush on Claire's behalf. When I arrived, Claire was already there, sitting stiffly at the table. She barely glanced at me. Mom served dinner in silence, and we ate with only the sound of clinking cutlery filling the air. Finally, Mom set her fork down and said, "This can't go on. We are family, and your father would hate to see you two like this." I stayed quiet, waiting. Claire's jaw was tight. Matt needs to admit he went too far. I almost laughed. "You changed the locks on me, Claire. You sold our father's furniture without asking. You tried to file paperwork that would have stolen my share of the house entirely. And you think I went too far?" Her face went red, but she didn't interrupt. "For months," I continued, "I was the one paying the bills, mowing the lawn, checking the pipes so they wouldn't burst in the winter. You never showed up. Not once. And then when you saw a chance to make some money, you decided to cut me out." I let the words hang there. Mom looked between us, her expression unreadable. "Claire," she said softly. "He's right. I didn't want to admit it, but you pushed this too hard. You should have worked with him." Claire stared at her, stunned. For once, she didn't have a comeback ready. I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, calm but firm. "We're going to get an independent appraisal. Then we're going to sit down with a lawyer and figure out whether we sell, rent, or I buy you out. But whatever we decide, it will be mutual. No more sneaking around. No more locks. No more lies." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. "And if I don't agree? Then we let a judge decide," I said simply. "But if it comes to that, I'll make sure every single document, text, and screenshot is presented. And I guarantee you won't like how that looks." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, Claire exhaled. "Fine," she said, the fight draining out of her. "We'll do it your way." Over the next month, we followed through. The appraisal came back higher than either of us expected, and Claire nearly choked when she realized how much value she'd been about to sell for less just to get a quick payout. We ended up negotiating a buyout. I would purchase her share over time with a modest interest rate. The lawyer drafted a contract, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Claire actually signed something in my presence. No tricks. No side deals. The day the papers were finalized, I drove straight to the house. It was mine now. Completely, legally, unquestionably mine. I stood in the living room for a long time, listening to the silence. For months, this house had been the center of a storm, a battlefield where I'd been forced to fight for my place in my own family. Now it was peaceful again. I walked out to the garage, ran my hand along the empty space where Dad's workbench used to be, and made myself a promise. I'd rebuild it, slowly, piece by piece, until it looked the way he left it. The next time Claire came by, it wasn't a fight. She stood awkwardly in the doorway while I showed her the plans I had for the house, refinishing the floors, restoring the yard, maybe even turning the upstairs into a rental suite someday. She didn't say much, but when she left, she glanced back and muttered, "At least you're doing something with it." Coming from Claire, that was practically a truce. As for Mom, things softened between us, too. She started stopping by to drop off meals or just sit on the porch with me while I worked on the house. One day, she even admitted quietly, "Your father would be proud of what you did." And for the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest lift. The house is different now. Not just physically, though I've made plenty of changes, but spiritually, it feels alive again, like it's mine in a way it never was before. I've started inviting friends over on weekends, cooking dinners in the kitchen that used to feel so empty. Sometimes I'll catch myself smiling when I see the sunset through the front window, just like Dad used to watch it from his recliner. And every now and then, when I lock up for the night, I think back to the moment I found that for sale sign by the garage. The moment I realized Claire was trying to erase me from my own story. She didn't erase me. She forged me. And as I turned the deadbolt on the front door last night, I said it out loud. Just for me. Just for Dad. This house stays. Then I smiled, turned off the porch light, and let the quiet settle over the home I fought for. The home that was finally completely mine. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy Reddit tales, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. And hey, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in this situation.